Okay, very good. So good evening, everybody. And I want to talk a little bit about what I wish I knew when I began teaching. And it's just some stuff that I've thought about over the years, and I've thought about as I um, introduce new teachers to the field. And as I work with teachers, I'm currently the head of school at Farber Hebrew Day School, and I was the head of school at Berman Hebrew Academy in the DC area for 12 years, both of which are ECC through 12th grade schools. So the first thing, I want to go back to when I began teaching. And when I began teaching, I started as a graduate student. I was a part-time teacher. I was pretty young. I knew my brother was in the school, and I knew some of his friends. And I felt like this was going to be relatively easy. I really was very passionate about my subject. At the time, it was Jewish history. I was getting a PhD in Jewish history. I'm relatively young. I was kind of, I think I was hip. I'm definitely not hip anymore, but at the time, this was close to 30 years ago. I thought I was hip. I thought I was likable. Seemed to me, I got along well with the students. So I just felt like, what could go wrong? Like what would I need besides all of that? I'm just going to show them how much I love my subject, and I'm going to be the greatest teacher ever, and I'm going to avoid all the mistakes that all of my other teachers have made. So one of the things that I think is the most important shift when from the time that you start teaching until the time that you sort of become, I wouldn't even say a veteran teacher, but you make that shift to being someone who already starts to learn the craft and already starts to learn what it means to teach kids, is recognizing that it's not about you. Now, that may seem easy or simple. I showed you, here's a picture where the teacher is front and center and the kids are in the background, which kind of represents someone, I think, who has kind of a backwards way of looking at what the teaching profession is. It may seem very simple, but the truth of the matter is that when you are a new teacher, when you are a relatively inexperienced teacher, you prepare for your lessons. You work really hard at it. You have an idea of what the beginning and middle and end is going to look like. You feel that preparing for that lesson is the most important thing. You give that lesson. It goes well. It doesn't go well. You spend time ruminating on how did that lesson go, and how did I perform, and how did I do, and should I have done better? And it's a very, very natural way to be thinking about what goes on in the classroom. At some point, though, you will recognize that your performance, and that's really what it is, you sort of your initial thoughts about your performance, your initial thoughts are about how I did. It's really not about how you did. It's about how the students are learning. It's about what the students got out of your lesson. It's about what ultimately what they are taking away. And that shift from how am I doing to how the students are doing is the absolute crucial shift. And I wish I had known this like very early on, because I think I spent like probably my first 3 years teaching, thinking, so much about myself and how I was doing and trying to do better and all of that, when I really should have been focusing on what the kids were learning. And that can actually mean a lot of different things when you think about what the kids are learning. So for one thing, sometimes it really behooves us to absorb the lesson of less really is more. So what does that mean, less really is more? And you may have heard about this in a lot of different contexts. But the truth of the matter is, if we really care about what the students are learning, then we need to make sure that we are focused on the most important parts of their learning. When I started teaching Jewish history, and I was a graduate student, and I think I mentioned I was so excited about this, and I just was going to fill them with everything that I knew. But the truth of the matter is that as a graduate student, I was piecing together all of that connective tissue in a way that meant very little to the students. What I really needed to do, and eventually I did as I learned more to what it meant to be a teacher and I became more comfortable with the profession, is I started to take units and say, I don't need to fill in everything between unit 1 and unit 2. I need them to understand what's the point of unit 1. What's the point of the emancipation of the Jews and what that meant for the past and future of Jewish history. And let's delve into what that idea is like. And let's think about how that compares to what goes on to Jews in our time. Getting into what is it that we really want kids to understand, our students to understand about the emancipation, focusing on that. And then, you know what? If they're totally interested in the subject, they will go and read on their own. But for my next unit, I was going to move on to 20 years later, 30 years later, whatever it might be. I was going to, sort of tell them how we got from one to the other and then focus on that next unit. I taught a lot less, but by focusing on what the students were learning, by focusing on a smaller unit, I believe I actually did a lot more. By focusing on the students, we also focus on something that is, I think, really, really crucial for teaching, which is checking for understanding. Those of you who may have been in education courses may have heard about this a lot. And if you have, I just want to reiterate, or I want to, continue to encourage this as something that you should, from a very early stage, incorporate into your practice. Checking for understanding can mean many different things and can be done in many different ways. At the very, very basic level, you can ask, like, do you understand? Thumbs up, thumbs down, to the side, whatever. And you can do this very frequently. I actually am not the biggest fan of doing that because you're getting a very superficial level and very superficial understanding of what the kids think they know. A much better way of checking for understanding is by doing something called dipsticking. You sort of just, as you know, with the oil, you put the stick into the oil to see how much is there, and you pull it back out and you check to see what's there. Dipsticking is a way of asking very short questions that require kids to respond to you in a meaningful way. They don't have to be long questions. They don't have to be elaborate questions. They're just a way of saying, are they with me now? Are they getting what I am saying? And sometimes you're going to find out that you do to some of these dipstick questions and they have no clue. Like, they look like they're paying attention. Maybe they're asking questions. Maybe they're kind of responding, but they really don't understand what it is you're trying to do. You're trying to teach a lesson in Chumash and you're going in one direction and they're completely off in a different direction. By dipsticking, by checking, you are able to quickly understand that. There are lots of electronic tools that people use. There's a Pear Deck and Socrative, and for those who are in math, Khan Academy has some quizzes that people can use. The key, though, is to get immediate feedback, to get important, meaningful feedback from your students as soon as possible, so that you can course correct when you notice, when you find out that students aren't understanding what it is that you are teaching. That too is a shift away from yourself as like, oh, I did a great job. I was dynamic. I was exciting. I was funny, to a focus on the kids. Did they understand? Can they repeat it? Can they adapt it or apply what we've been learning to some other similar situation? And the last thing I want to mention in this regard is that asking for help is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. And I can tell you that not just as somebody who has asked for help, but also somebody who's been on the other side and either has listened to people asking for help or been an administrator and been in the field and recognizing the teachers who are asking for that help. It is very impressive when we see young, inexperienced teachers going out of their way to make relationships with their colleagues, to make those connections, and constantly asking for help. It's a sign that you want to grow. It's a sign that you recognize that there's growth to be had. It's a sign that you realize that if there are shortcuts to be taken to understand certain things, by all means, take those shortcuts. There's no reason for you to reinvent the wheel. And from our perspective, it shows us that you've really got a growth mindset and that you have, that you really want to become the best teacher possible and that you are thinking about how I can do things differently. One of the things that is really important in this regard is finding the right kind of faculty where you teach, where this is the norm, where colleagues expect to help each other. They expect people to ask questions, and it becomes routine. And I'd like to believe that at Farber in Southfield, Michigan, this is precisely the kind of faculty that we have. It's a relatively small school. It's 300 kids from ECC through 12th grade. And it really is a place where everybody asks each other questions, everybody becomes colleagues. And the last thing in this regard I want to mention is that teaching really is the most rewarding profession. And at the beginning, it's hard. It is hard. It is hard when you start out with a number of different classes and a number of different preps. Hanukkah time comes and you're just tired and you're ready for a break. And it does come, fortunately, either at Hanukkah time or winter break, whenever it might be. But when you realize the impact that you have on kids, and it is greater than you could ever imagine, it can be a hugely positive impact. It can also be a negative impact if you say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. But learning to say the right thing, making that impact on that kid, on that student, on that group of students, it is so tremendously rewarding on day after day, month after month, year after year. And it's just a great profession, a great thing to do. I want to talk a little bit about Farber, but I want to also just recognize if there's anyone who has a question, because I've been talking for a very long time. If you do, just either raise your hand or call out. See, if this were a class, I would actually ask you a question, check for understanding. Since you're all people who I don't know, and I don't have, I'm not going to quiz you on anything. I'm not going to do that. But the other thing is, of course, we want to have some wait time. So I asked a question. I waited for a few seconds. There was none of you who had a question. But you always want to give it a little bit of time before going on, because sometimes that question comes not in second 1, but in second 2 or 3 or 4. There are some kids who take a little time. So Farber Hebrew Day School is Michigan's only modern Orthodox day school. As I mentioned, ECC through 12, around 300 students, very supportive, collegial, very warm faculty. I talk with the faculty one-on-one. I meet with each faculty for 10 to 15 minutes just to chat with them over the course of the year. And I always ask them what they like about Farber. 2/3 of them point out that it's just an incredibly warm place, well, not physically warm place, but figuratively warm place. It's a great faculty and it's a great family within the school. So it's a tremendous testament to what it means to be in that kind of environment. The Detroit community. So first of all, the cost of living cannot be beat. It is nowhere near what it is on the East Coast. And it's a real sizable Jewish community. It's a growing modern Orthodox community, in part because of the affordability. It's got 6 restaurants. It's got a full kosher shop. It's got several modern Orthodox shuls. It has all the rest of the infrastructure. Obviously, I have a kaddish and a mikveh and a cemetery and all those kind of things, which you don't have to worry about right now. And it's a quick 1-hour flight to New York. It's really not that far for those for whom New York is your home base. It's really a 1 to 1.5 hour flight all over the East Coast, certainly the Northeast. And just to give you a sense of what it means to live in Farber. So a teaching couple can afford the mortgage on this house in Southfield. 4/10 of an acre, 4 bedrooms, 4 baths, 2,500 square feet, plus a furnished basement, close walk to the Young Israel of Southfield, a 1-minute commute to school. And I'm pretty sure this is not what you get on teaching salaries in Teaneck, New Jersey. Our positions that we are looking for right now are a first grade limited Kodesh teacher, somebody who knows Talam is preferable, and also middle school and high school teachers in all areas of limited Kodesh. We do have mentoring. We're part of the JNTP Jewish New Teacher Project mentoring program, and so we assign a new mentor to anybody who is new to the teaching profession. And as I said, we're very, very supportive in that way. And it's a really a great atmosphere and great environment in the school. So those are, that's my little presentation on what I wish I knew when I started teaching. I hope it was meaningful. And if there are questions or things you want to ask about Farber or about my presentation, I'd be happy to answer. If not, then I wish you all a great evening and good luck.
Thank you, Rabbi.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm here.
Karavani.
I know you probably have a different Zoom call to go on.